Well, we're in John chapter 13 today. John chapter 13. I mentioned this last week, but this is the moment in John's gospel where time really slows down. You know, sometimes we've skipped 6 months at a time or even a year at a time. You know, John sometimes just doesn't even tell us when something has happened. We kind of have to read around other gospels to figure it out. But a lot of times he's skipping quite a bit of time. But here, things slow down over the next couple of chapters, and we're in the upper room. Jesus is having the Last Supper, right? This last moment with his disciples. And it's such a beautiful, intimate time, and we get to share in that. He wrote down these words for us, and we get to hear them. And so for over the next couple of chapters, we're just going to be able to camp out with Jesus in the upper room and listen in and be discipled. This is one of those moments. I think I read it in a commentary this week that John has more words to Jesus's disciples than any of the other gospels. And that really makes sense, this upper room discourse here. And so we see him preaching to the crowds a lot, right? Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthews 5 through 7, we get to see that. But here, he's teaching his disciples in a very intimate setting, and then he'll pray for them as well, which is also beautiful. So, fantastic moment. And I hope this ministers to you. This has really ministered to me. All of John has, but I was very pleasantly surprised about the message here in John chapter 13. I hope you get a lot out of it. There's, as usual, quite a bit of things, whether we're talking about servant leadership that we should all be exhibiting, or whether we should be trusting him in circumstances that we don't understand. There's many things for us here today. So let's go ahead and dive into John chapter 13. Here's what it says. Before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Now, when it was time for supper, the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray him. Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands, and he had come from God, and that he was going back to God. And so he got up from supper, laid aside his outer clothing, took a towel, and tied it around himself. Next, he poured water into a basin, and began to wash his disciples' feet, and to dry them with the towel tied around him. And he came to Simon Peter, who asked him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, What I'm doing you don't realize now, but afterwards you will understand. You will never wash my feet, Peter said. Jesus replied, If I don't wash you, you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head. One who has bathed, Jesus told him, doesn't need to wash anything except his feet, but he is completely clean. You are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who it was who would betray him. That is why he said, Not all of you are clean. Now let's take that chunk right there and understand that part, and then we'll move on to the next section as well. Before we talk about the foot washing part, I just want to camp out on the first few verses here. And I believe, I did not get a chance to double check this, but I believe that verses 1 through 4 are one sentence in the original Greek. And we've split it up to make it a little bit easier. That happens often in Greek. You can have very, very, very long sentences, and it's completely fine. Like Romans 1, for example, has a gigantic sentence in it in the Greek. But what's interesting about it is you can still kind of get that idea because it acts as an introduction. It's basically like, here's all of these pieces of information that you need to know to understand the rest of it. And so the crux of that very last part, verse 4, is Jesus is going to wash his disciples' feet. So he lays aside his outer garments and puts on a towel and gets a wash basin. But look at everything that leads up to that. And this is why this is a gigantic sentence in Greek. It's because that moment in time where he's going to do that is packed with a lot of meaning because of everything that comes before it. So let's look at each section there. So before the Passover festival, which is something in and of itself, which we've talked about before, what goes into the Passover festival and the significance of how Jesus is going to fulfill that. So there's one element, but there's a lot of other things in here too. Jesus knew, remember his omniscience and his supernatural ability. He knows all things. He's planned all things, right? He knows the will of God. Jesus knew that his hour had come. How many times have we seen his hour had not come? Do you remember that? All the way back to even chapter 2 when Mary says, hey, they have no wine. And he says, what is this to me? My hour has not yet come. It's like the very first time I think that he says that. But now he knows his hour has come. And then you could jump down to verse 4. So he got up, put a towel around his waist to wash his disciples' feet. But let's go back and look at some more. So he knew his hour had come to depart from this world to the Father. Next, having loved his own who are in the world, he took out a towel and a basin and washed his disciples' feet. You get kind of the idea? That's kind of what John wants you to do here. He loved them to the end. That's a powerful love right there. And so this is Jesus' perseverance. He didn't just love them a little bit or love them at, you and I might sometimes have a problem loving certain tough individuals, like Peter, for example, kind of says the wrong thing at the wrong time. No, he kept loving them, and he loved them to the end. In other words, he would continue loving them all the way to the cross. So John is kind of forward-looking towards that. Now it was time for supper, and the devil had already been put into the heart of Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray him. So Jesus took up the towel, wrapped it around his waist, and took out a wash basin and washed his disciples' feet. Think about that.
Now, did Jesus wash? Because Judas Iscariot has the devil. Did he wash his feet or not?
He did. Yep, he washed them all. Now, we're going to come back to that, though, because he uses this as an object lesson. So it's not just about the washing of the feet, but there's more to it. And he uses it to kind of point out this thing. And the disciples missed it, but we're going to understand how he washed Judas's feet, but he was not clean. So, but let's continue here. John chapter 13, verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands. So in case we worried, oh no, Satan is going to win. Judas is going to betray Jesus. Like, this is terrible. No. Jesus knew the Father had given everything into his hands, and that he had come from God, and that he was going back to God. So he got that wash basin and tied the towel around his waist and washed his disciples' feet. I mean, significant. You hear that? That's what John is wanting you to get, this pattern of here's all of these events and pieces of information and knowledge that Jesus had, things that were happening in the room and the time that it is, and this is the significance of the fact that he chose this moment to wash his disciples' feet. Yeah.
I think the disciples were probably focused a lot on this washing of the feet rather than maybe hearing what he's saying, because this is a servant's role.
That's right.
And here he's wanting to be, in their minds, their servant, wash their feet, and they're going, no, I'm confused,
Yeah.
And when you read that earlier, him washing the feet made me think of when he forgave me. He washed me clean.
That's right.
And,
Yes.
And it never struck me that way, because he, in essence, washes us clean.
That's right.
Because he said they were already clean except for the feet.
Yes, and that's going to be his main message here. Kind of the main message that's behind everything, and then he has a couple of applications that come from it. But let's not miss the spiritual significance that you just brought out, is that he's representing to them what he's going to do at the cross for salvation, that he washes us clean. So it's not just about the feet, it's more significant. So I love that, because Peter's not going to get that. He's like, no, don't wash my feet. And so that'll really help us understand the next part. What else in these first 4 verses stood out to you, or what significance do you see here?
Judas Iscariot never was a believer.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we're going to see that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're being directed by Satan himself, very tragic. What else do you know about foot washing in this culture? Dennis mentioned that this was a servant's job, which is very true. What else? Maybe you've
It's the lowest
studied this.
of servants.
Yeah, the lowest of this is not a pleasant task to do. And why is that? Why give it to the lowest servant? Why is this not a pleasant thing? What do we know about this time period in this culture? What? They're wearing sandals, right? And
If that, yeah.
huh? Dusty, dirty roads. And not just like, oh my goodness, I've got some dust on my feet, but we're walking and there's a lot of sewage in the road. Okay? In fact, in some places, the way that you dealt with sewage is you would have trenches that either ran down the middle of the road or on the sides of the road. If you were lucky, sometimes they just, put it wherever, and, it would be running down the road. Or, if it's raining, you've got all of that. Garbage in the streets, right? Not a very pleasant picture. Yeah, so you've got all of that stuff along with the dust.
Well, and he does it in the middle of the meal, so when he's
Yes.
hand washing there, it's already happened, and he
Mhm.
goes and deals with all this. Yeah.
So let's lean on that for a minute, because in that culture, if you were to walk into someone's house and they're hosting you, they should be washing your feet. But now we've got this meal that's already happened. They're not just like entering the room, and now suddenly he's washing their feet. What are the implications of that?
He's the guest of honor, correct?
What's that?
He's the guest of honor. Correct?
Yeah, he'd be the guest of honor.
He shouldn't do that.
He's their teacher. So 12 men missed the opportunity to wash his feet and each other's feet. They were all like, nope, not going to do it. Where's that servant? Which also does make me wonder, what was the host doing?
When you walk in the house, they wash your feet.
Right.
They're in the upper room.
Yeah.
They're trapped with all that waste.
Outside stairs.
See, I always wondered if that was a second washing. If they did go in and have an initial washing.
Maybe.
And
Yeah, I
they
don't know.
weren't quite as cruddy. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. We don't know. The text doesn't tell us.
They
But
were sent to prepare a place.
that's true.
And so
Mhm.
when they prepared it, I don't think they prepared a person to wash feet.
That's fair, yeah. From, what is that, Luke's Gospel
And,
that talks about
it's a
those
very
details?
humbling. I don't know if you've ever experienced foot washing, if you've ever gone through.
Yeah.
It's humbling experience.
Yes.
It really
Wash
is.
or to have them.
Well, we did both.
Oh.
We did both.
Yeah.
And actually, I'd rather wash the feet
Yeah, then have
than
them.
I just
Yeah.
have someone else do that. It's very humbling, I think. I mean, it's too much.
Mhm.
You know?
We did this at work once. The vice
Oh.
presidents and the president washed all the department heads' feet
Wow.
at a meeting we had. It's very humbling and embarrassing to a point.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can maybe sympathize with Peter a little bit. Yeah. So regardless of whether the host just missed it or maybe this is a second washing, we don't know that could be. He does come to Simon Peter to wash his feet. He's washing all the disciples' feet. And Peter gives us one of the last moments of that confusion cycle between the physical and the spiritual. You remember that, where he talks about bread and people are just, they're focused on the bread, or the woman at the well is focused on the water, and he means something spiritual and they're missing the point. So he's washing their feet. Peter in verse 6 is like, no, you're not going to touch my feet. And Jesus says, well, what I'm doing, you don't realize now in verse 7, but afterwards you will understand, right? So now as we're reading this, we can get understanding. They were missing it. You will never wash my feet, Peter said. He's still stuck in that physical cycle. He's like, you are my Lord. I should be washing your feet. My question is, then why didn't you? That's kind of, but anyway, but you'll never wash my feet. Jesus replied, if I don't wash you, you have no part with me. Now, we should not mistake this and say, okay, well, if we don't get our feet washed, then somehow like that should be like, some people actually read into this that we have to be baptized in order to be saved. This is one of the passages where they get that, okay? If I don't wash you, because the language changes there, it's not wash your feet. If I don't wash you, and they'll say, okay, so baptism is required for salvation. Let's not misunderstand that. He's not talking about physical water here. And you mentioned it earlier. He is talking about washing and cleansing us with his blood. So he's using this as an object lesson. Yes, about servant leadership, but also about salvation.
I have a friend that believes you have to be baptized to be saved. So her grandson accepted the Lord like at midnight. Woke the whole church up. They had to go to church to see him be baptized. Because if he would die, he would not go to heaven.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, oh, I'm so glad. It's just, well, we all look at things so differently, and sometimes people get messed up.
Yeah.
I know I have. I mean, I'm going to yes, James, but I feel bad for them that they think that has to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I just figure if Peter gets it all wrong, I'm okay.
That's true. I mean, isn't it great that we have Peter as an example? Like, it's so encouraging, And he even is eventually going to deny the Lord 3 times, and then the Lord restores him. So he can do the same for us, And Peter also will say, the writings of Paul are hard to understand. I believe he says that in 2 Peter, or maybe it's 1 Peter. But he says that Paul's difficult to understand. I'm like, okay, so it's okay if we struggle a little bit with understanding Paul.
And when you think about what Paul did before he was saved,
Yeah.
And God forgave him for that. So.
Yes, that's right. Yep, another great example. Okay, so Peter is stuck in this idea here that, okay, Jesus is talking about something spiritual. He doesn't get it because we see in verse 9, after Jesus said, if I don't wash you, you have no part with me. So he's like, oh, okay, wash all of me then. Give me an entire bath, which is the other side of the spectrum now. It's like, nope, not what we're talking about. So again, just as Jesus has done with the woman at the well, with Nicodemus, with the crowd in John 6, in all of these situations where they get stuck in this physical cycle, he helps us understand. Verse 10. One who has bathed, Jesus told him, doesn't need to wash anything except his feet. So kind of using that as a physical example. But he is completely clean. You are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who would betray him, and that's why he said, not all of you are clean. So he's helping us understand this and saying, okay, it's more than just the water. If you take a bath, you're clean. Then you go out and you walk on the road and you need your feet washed. But he's like, if you get washed from me, you are clean. And then he kind of uses that and says, and all of you are clean because you're with me. I'm washing you. And he's not talking about the physical washing, but not all of you are clean. Judas just had his feet clean, but he was not clean. Okay? Let's move on. Let's see if we can understand this a little bit more, because now he's going to go further with this in verses 12 and following. When Jesus had washed their feet and put on his outer clothing, he reclined again and said to them, do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are speaking rightly, since that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done for you. Truly I tell you, a servant is not greater than his master, and a messenger is not greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I'm not speaking about all of you. I know those I have chosen. But the scripture must be fulfilled. The one who eats my bread has raised his heel against me. I'm telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am he. By the way, that's another one of those ego eimi, I am. We added the he because that helps us in English, but in the Greek it's so that you will believe that I am. Truly I tell you, whoever receives anyone I send receives me, and the one who receives me receives him who sent me. All right, let's break that down. A lot of different things in there. Some of it seems a little bit random, but it is all connected as usual. None of this is accidental. So the significance, and Peter did at least understand the significance of who Jesus is. And he starts with that. You call me teacher and Lord. And so Peter, you didn't want to be washed because I'm your teacher, I'm your Lord. And that's usually the situation. That yes, that is what I am. But if I washed your feet, verse 14, you ought also to wash one another's feet. So is this something that we are just missing in the church today? That we need to be washing each other's feet and we're just not? Is this a command that we should be following? What do you all think about that?
I think it's like if Terry would see me constantly being in a sin, she would help counsel me to understand that I'm doing it, or say, you want me to pray for you, something, because it's not the feet thing.
Yeah.
It's the sin thing.
Yeah. Great example.
And it's praying for others, and
Well, I think it's a comment on our service to others in Christ. Don't be afraid to do whatever needs to be done.
That's right.
You just do it.
So it goes
It's not on
beyond
the bathroom floor. It's
foot
okay.
washing.
well,
Yeah,
it's like how
bathroom floor.
everybody helps. Like when I was, had surgery,
Mm.
we're all here for Pat, but there's nothing we can do for her.
Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts about that?
Except pray.
Well, I think it's also that you aren't feeling above the other person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because some people do all these things, but then they kind of brag or boast to make sure that
That's right.
everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
And you're actually feeling above. And I think Jesus was very humble in that he was washing the feet, but he was also a symbol. But I'm just saying that he's saying that's what we need to be. I don't know.
Yeah. That's right.
What he did would be very surprising because no rabbis would ever consider doing it.
Well,
That's right.
Verses above, he said, masters are not higher than slaves, slaves are not higher than masters.
Yeah.
So we're all equal in God's sight.
Mm-hmm.
The poor are just as important as the rich.
Yeah. And if he is doing that, we should be following him in that example of servant leadership. We're not above him, so we're not exempt from the foot washing. And again, it's not about feet washing. Now, there are some brothers and sisters that do practice this as something equal to baptism. I don't think that, or the Lord's Supper, and I don't think that it's meant that way, but it's not wrong to physically wash each other's feet. As you mentioned, it's a beautiful and humbling experience. I've had that too when we went on the mission field to serve, and we washed each other's feet. First our leaders washed our feet, and we washed people's feet on our team, and I was like, wow, that was a really interesting experience that was humbling and just really opened my eyes to it as well. And I kind of felt a little bit like Peter. I was like, I don't really want somebody else touching my feet. And I was like, wow, but I'm not opening up to my team. So there was a lot that I learned through that experience. But it doesn't seem like this is a requirement here, because if we take this as a requirement, and by the way, I believe there's only one other instance of foot washing mentioned, which is in Timothy. There is a widow, I think, that is known for washing the saints' feet. But it doesn't seem like it's something that the church regularly did during that time. But I think if we take that as, okay, we need to start like literally washing each other's feet, like that's the only thing that he means here, we miss the point. Okay? Not that that makes it wrong. I think washing feet is a beautiful thing. Okay? But I don't think we're supposed to take this as equal to the Lord's Supper.
The reason why the difference is is this was a routine of any, not religiously,
Yes.
but of any occasion. If you came to
Yes.
someone's house and you've been walking along, there'd be someone washing your feet. So
Yeah.
it's not like the ceremonies are the procedures that they put in as a humbling experience with God.
Yeah.
Understanding God. So it's not the same. This is something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
My nephew got married, they did, in their wedding,
Oh.
the foot washing. It was very touching, I mean,
Ah. Oh, I like that.
That's neat.
Hmm. Let's go a little bit further here. He keeps bringing this whole thing, which is very fascinating. He keeps bringing this back to Judas. Okay, they don't know this is Judas, but we know in hindsight. So in verse 17, let's not miss that real quick. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. In other words, if you know you're not greater than the master, you're the messenger who is sent, and you're not greater than the one who sent you, right? You're taking a letter from one king to, one of his lords somewhere. You're not greater than the king who sent you, right? So you should serve one another. Just as if I'm your king and I've served you, you should too. Okay, so if we don't miss that, verse 17, if you know those things, you'll be blessed if you do them, if you serve one another, right? I am not speaking about all of you. So he's going to get real here. I know those I have chosen, but the scripture must be fulfilled. Now, this is very fascinating here. He's quoting from one of the Psalms of David. The one who eats my bread has raised his heel against me. I'm telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am he. So here's this prophecy he's bringing to their attention, one that was written very long ago, and he said, here's another way that you'll know. You've seen the works that I've done. You know me. You've heard my teaching. You've heard voices from heaven. He's many times predicted his death, and now he's predicting one of you is going to betray me, and it's one of you who's eating bread with me. Before we move on, let's understand the context of this passage. So we don't need to go to that psalm necessarily, but does any of you know a time where King David was betrayed? Because what we have here is an example of something called a type, which is something in the Old Testament that happens, actually historically happens, that is also predicting Jesus in some way. Can you think of an example?
David had a son
Yeah,
that tried to be king.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And didn't Absalom also rape his sister?
Yes.
That was Absalom's rebellion.
Yeah, so you're right. So one of his sons betrays him, tries to become king, and so there's this man whose name is Athaliheleth or something like that. A lot of THs and Ls in there. And he ate at King David's table, and he's talking to Absalom, and Absalom is like, how do I get people to really know that I'm powerful enough to be king? This is a terrible story. It's uncomfortable to tell, but anyway, so this guy's like, what if you took all of David's concubines up to the roof and you slept with all of them? And then everybody will know that you're king in David's place. So that's what they do. They put a tent up on the roof and he sleeps with all of David's concubines. Great. Later, check this out. That guy, Athaliheleth, whatever, he feels so guilty about what happened that he goes home, puts all of his affairs in order, and hangs himself. Any parallels? So here's this prophecy from King David, who's just agonizing over the fact that even the people who are eating bread with him, his friends, are raising their heel against him, betraying him. And you have this picture of Jesus. So Jesus is going back to the King David reference. So let's dig into this further. Verse 21. When Jesus had said this, he was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." Wow. Can you imagine being in the room at that moment?
Do you think he's trying to give Judas a chance
I wonder.
to back out, to not do this?
And I think I read some commentaries that mentioned that his grace and mercy to Judas lasted until the end. But at the same time, he knew what Judas was going to
Yeah.
do.
But did Judas know that he was gonna do that? Not until later on in the verse, when,
In verse 1 or 2, I think.
If he'd already been approached, whether he had decided or not, or he had said he
yeah,
was.
you're right.
Yeah, that's right. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas to betray him. That's in verse 2. So that idea is already there. He plans on doing it. Could he still back out? Theoretically. Was that God's plan? No. Because the scripture has to be fulfilled.
Okay.
But yeah, that it's a terrifying thing. And imagine being there. These are all people that you've served with for 3 years, right? Judas would have been in a group of people that Jesus sent out and had power over demons and healing sickness. You remember when he sends the disciples out and they're so excited when they come back? They're like, even the demons obeyed us when we commanded them to get out. And Jesus is like, no, don't rejoice in that. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Judas would have been in that group, except his name was not written in heaven.
And Jesus knew all along.
That's right.
You know, to know all along that he was going to do that, and yet to love him that whole time.
That's right.
He's a much better man than most of us are.
Yes.
I keep
Yes.
wondering what he's thinking as they're all perplexed and looking around.
Yeah.
You know, what's
Yeah.
he doing?
Yeah.
All those who weren't, it's like, is it me? It's like, that's how secure they were, not
Mhm.
there.
Yes. Yeah. Is it I? Is it I? Right. Going around, which we get in the other Gospels. John doesn't record that, but yeah, they have this moment of doubt, which is interesting, right? So, where are we? Verse 21. Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. The disciples started looking at one another, uncertain which one he was speaking about. One of his disciples, the one Jesus loved, was reclining close to Jesus, and I love this. Simon Peter motioned to him to find out who it was he was talking about. You just imagine that, Peter, like, John! Ask him. And so you got to imagine they're not sitting in tables like you are, or the picture that Leonardo da Vinci gave us of they're sitting at a table at the Last Supper. That's not what it looks like. The table's low to the ground. They're all reclining on pillows. And so John is, I believe, leaning this way against Jesus, because usually they'd eat with their right hand, I think. So he's leaning this way, and so he can kind of recline back to Jesus and say, hey, what are you talking about, right? So that's why. And Peter is either way on the other side or maybe across the table or something, so he's not able to have that kind of whisper conversation that John has.
All the disciples think they're a little bit, because John says the one he loved, and he's the one that's writing the book.
Yeah. Yep.
You think maybe Peter was? Peter knows that at the time of the trials that Judas betrayed him, but when he betrays him too, in his way, you gotta wonder if he was thinking back to this statement too.
That's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Like he also betrays him. I mean, really, they all did, because they all run, right? Peter eventually does follow, but then betrays him
Well,
again.
It
So.
makes me think, like, when I got sick, it's like, God, why, da-da-da-da, which is a form of betrayal, because I'm just not trusting. I get there, but
Yeah.
when something first happens, it's like, really, God? Haven't I got enough problems,
Yeah.
So we all kind of do that in being human when we have a problem.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So again, it's encouraging. It's not about our works, right? It's Him.
Yeah, but questioning God and betraying God, there's a difference. You said you question it, you're just wanting answers.
Mm.
God will answer, maybe never.
That is a fair point. In fact, on the cross, Jesus quotes from Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So he's crying out to God and asking him a difficult question. And, you know, that's also a psalm of David, if I remember correctly. So David has lots of psalms like that are asking questions. So I think that's a good distinction too, is as long as you're crying out to him in a posture of still looking to him for help.
Yeah, and I
Garden
think,
of Gethsemane, example of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
God, Jesus knows what he's supposed to do, and he says, "Hey, can we do this any other way, please?" Repeatedly, and yet he didn't sin.
That's right.
So.
Yet not my will, but your will.
and
So, yeah.
I think when he said that to God, he knew it, but he had bore the whole world's sin on him, and God couldn't look on sin.
Yeah.
And to know that God loved him, but yet, yeah, that would be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Let's go a little bit further. So we know that he's mentioned multiple times, one of you is not clean. Now, one of you is going to betray me. So John whispers, "Hey, who's it going to be?" Jesus replied, "He's the one I give the piece of bread to after I have dipped it." Well, that's a pretty clear sign. I mean, they were all kind of sharing from this bowl, right? So you get bread, you dip it in, you eat it, but it must be clear enough. Maybe Jesus did it, immediately right after that. It must have been clear enough that we get that sign, but somehow they still kind of missed it. One thing I was thinking about this week is we know that Peter had a sword right at this moment. In fact, in Luke's gospel, Jesus asked, "Does anyone have a sword?" And Peter's like, "Here are 2 swords." So, like, they were armed, right? And you got to wonder, like, if Peter knew it's Judas, he'd be like, chasing after him. But Jesus didn't allow that to happen. So
I have
there's.
to wonder if this isn't what Jesus answered John quietly, and nobody
That's a
else
good
heard.
point.
Because
Yep.
later, in another verse or so, none of them understand it yet.
That's true.
That's a good reading of this. Yeah, Jesus replied to John. That makes sense to me. Yeah. So then, when he had dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas, Simon Iscariot's son. After Judas ate the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Isn't that chilling? That's the descent that he's on. And in verse 2, it was Satan had already planted that idea. Now Satan takes direct control. Yikes. To go back to something that, Becky, I think you said earlier, could Judas have turned away, or, could Jesus, was he still like giving him an opportunity? This is a very significant moment, because giving someone a piece of bread like that, that's a sign of friendship. That's a sign of peace right there. So there's a lot of symbolic significance to that. And he accepts it and betrays him anyway. You have a similar situation than when he betrays him with a kiss, because a kiss is a sign of peace and friendship. But that's how he's choosing to betray him, which is terrible, right? It's not, I'm choosing to betray you, like, shouting at you, there he is. It's, I'm going to have an intimate sign of friendship with you, and that's the one that you're supposed to take. Yikes.
It just kind of shows how deceptive people can be when the devil, they can't see anything they do as being wrong.
Yeah.
Because they're doing what the devil has control over them.
This gets real interesting here. Don't miss John's symbolism and detail. So Satan enters into Judas. So Jesus told him, "What you are doing, do quickly." And in the Greek, it's like, hurry it along. Like, it's now time. Jesus is controlling it, right? So it's not that this all happened to him, he's a victim of circumstances. Jesus controls the timing, right? Because it's God's will. And so he's like, now, go do it.
And he's not speaking to Judas anymore.
Also, yep, good point. None of those, verse 28, none of those reclining at the table knew why he said this to him. Since Judas kept the money bag, some thought Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. After receiving the piece of bread, he immediately left, and it was night. One commentator that I read this week said, any other gospel writer who wrote, "and it was night," we would think, oh, okay, that's just a time marker. But for John, "and it was night" is extremely significant. And so let's take a moment to understand that. Why is that so significant? What is that symbolizing?
Darkness.
Yeah, spiritual darkness. So here's another physical thing, spiritual darkness. Now, what are some things Jesus has taught us about darkness in John's Gospel? You recall? Mm-hmm. Sin, yep. Definitely a link with sin. Okay.
He's the opposite. He's light.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy chose the dark.
That's
rather
right.
than choosing Jesus.
That's right. This goes back to all of the teaching that he's had as the light of the world. And John has told us that since the beginning. So if you want to follow along, I'm going to just kind of take a review survey with you, because it's actually quite a few times that Jesus mentions light. We're just going to hit a couple of key ones, but if you want to jump, you can. Or if you just want to listen, that's fine too, because we'll be jumping around a lot. We're going to go back to John 1. John 1. Verse 6. Verse 4. John 1, verse 4. In him was life, talking about Jesus, and that life was the light of men. That light shines where? In the darkness. And yet the darkness did not overcome it, or some translations say did not understand it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, talking about John the Baptist, but he came to testify about the light, Jesus. The true light that gives light to everyone is coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was created through him, and yet the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. And you can almost hear Judas in here. Judas didn't receive him. Okay? So that's one example. And by the way, how does John 1:1 begin?
In the beginning.
In the beginning. And so that takes us back to Genesis. And then what was the first thing God created? Let there be light. Okay? And we know from John 1 and Romans 1 and Hebrews 1 that Jesus is the one who's creating. God commands it, and Jesus is creating it. He's the author of all things. It's amazing. So he's doing all that work as the light. He creates light. Well, let's go forward a couple of verses or a couple of chapters here. John chapter 8, verse 12. John 8:12. So this is the key I am statement. I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So here we have Judas, whose feet was just washed. And Jesus had that moment where he was saying, the servant's not greater than the master. You should be following me in what I'm doing. And there he goes out into the darkness. And the rest of the disciples stayed. Confused, doubting sometimes, getting it wrong a lot. But they stayed. They were following him. But Judas went out and walked in darkness. Let's go to chapter 9. Remember the significance of the fact that in chapter 9 there's a man who was born blind, who is in darkness physically. And the disciples ask him, who sinned, this man or his parents? And in verse 3, Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned. This came about so that God's works might be displayed in him. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Here we have a transition to something a little bit different. We know that Jesus is the light of the world, but now he's talking and saying, while I'm here with you, it is day. Soon night is coming, but it's not yet his hour. And so there's kind of this second way that we see Jesus teaching about light, where he's referencing it as the time where I'm here with you, and then comes the crucifixion and this temporary darkness that's not sin, but it looks like the victory that Satan has won. But then comes the resurrection. Okay? Slightly different. Okay, I think I have one more here. Chapter 11. Lazarus, who is in darkness, in a tomb, who is dead. And everything around him is sorrow, and people are in darkness weeping, right? In fact, maybe even one of the prophecies of Jesus is fulfilled here, where it says that people who were in darkness and who had sorrow have seen a great light. And maybe that's referenced here as well. So Jesus loves Lazarus, chapter 11, verse 5. Jesus loved Mary, Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in that place where he was. And then after he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea again. Rabbi, the disciples told him, just now the Jews were trying to stone you. And you want to go there again? So here's Jesus' response. Aren't there 12 hours in a day? Jesus answered, if anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him. Again, very similar words here. And so he's basically saying, right now is the time to work. Right now is the time when I'm here. The Father has given me works to do to glorify him, and I'm going to do that. And we're going to bring light into the situation. But darkness is coming. Now here he kind of blends the two. Darkness is coming when I'm going to be in the grave, and then it's going to be good again. But also notice that if you're walking in the light, you can see where you're going. If you're walking in the darkness, you're going to stumble. So he kind of blends the two teachings together. Always follow me, then you're in the light. But right now we got to work because it's day. By the way, the disciples will pick up this teaching later. And now we're in another period of day before he returns. So they echo the voice of David. Today, if you hear his voice, believe. And, Jesus comes like a thief in the night, and then it's too late. And so there's kind of a similar idea. Now we're waiting for his return. It's the day. Let's get to work, people, because night is coming. But it's not a night of darkness and sin. It's, okay, then this period of time is over, and a new day will dawn, and we'll be with him forever. And in Revelation, we know that there will no longer be any night.
No stars,
yes.
No sun, no moon, nothing but
Jesus
God's
is the light.
brilliance.
Yes. Right? So just some beautiful teaching here that echoes all the way from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And John really picks that up. So just in way of a review. Now, it's likely that I maybe missed one, so I just want to pause real quick. Did you think of any other light passages that you want to bring up before we move on here? All right. So that verse 30, and it was night. In John chapter 13, verse 30. Very significant, because here, Judas is walking in darkness of sin, but also, this is now the hour that Jesus will be betrayed, and so darkness is coming, just temporarily. When he had left, Jesus said, verse 31, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Which is kind of interesting, right? Darkness is falling. I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be crucified. All of this is terrible. No, God is going to be glorified, and he will be glorified at once. So it's kind of this This is a momentary thing, but all of this will be for God's glory. You may not feel like it in the moment. And they're not really understanding the context here, but they will. Verse 33, this is beautiful. Check this out. Little children. Basically, the Greek there is like kiddos. My little ones. It's one of the only times that Jesus uses it. John, writing 1 John, says it frequently. So he picks it up from that and says little children when he's speaking to the church he's writing to. And I believe Paul says it a couple of times as well. So this is a very, very intimate thing. That's how he feels about you and me. Little children, I am with you a little while longer. You will look for me just as I have told the Jews, and now I will tell you, where I'm going you cannot come. I give you a new command. Love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this, everyone will know you are my disciples, if you love one another. How are we to love one another here in these two verses?
Just like Jesus loved everybody.
Just like Jesus loved everybody. And we just saw a great example of that, right? Washing their feet. This is also how we know that probably we're not supposed to be washing each other's feet as something equal to the Lord's Supper, because he extends that into here and says, just as I have loved you. In other words, I am your leader, but I am serving you. Yes?
And he washed everybody's feet, Jews included.
That's right.
So
That's right.
the love extended out there despite his coming betrayal.
Yeah, let's emphasize that, Dennis. He was washed. Remember that physical spiral? He was washed physically. He was not washed spiritually. Jesus gave him bread. Remember, Jesus is the bread of life. He ate Jesus' physical bread, but he did not receive the bread from heaven. Yikes. He was with the light of the world, but he went out where it was night and walked in darkness.
But he didn't blame all Jews for what Judas did.
That's right. That's right.
God doesn't look at a group and say, this group is at fault of that.
Yeah.
We always have to look at the person.
Yeah.
Some people say the Jews killed my Lord. Well, good thing he did, because that was the plan, but it wasn't the Jews. It was one man.
Yeah, that's, and if you hear somebody say that, bring them to the scriptures. This is a great one, right? Judas betrayed him. However, the Jews did betray Jesus to his death. Remember, the crowd decided, we want Barabbas. We don't want Jesus.
Right.
His blood be on our heads and our children, is what they said. However, they didn't have the legal right to kill Jesus. So who was it that put Jesus to death? Rome. And Rome was the picture of the world. It was the non-Jews. So God beautifully worked this out so that the Jews betrayed and killed Jesus, and the Gentiles killed Jesus. So all of us are represented in that group. Okay? It's the same way that legally Adam represents all of humanity. Paul says in Galatians that the seed of all humanity was in Adam when he sinned. And so he is what we call our federal head. He represents all of the human race. So when he sinned, we all sinned in him. So when Pilate washes his hands and betrays Jesus, when the soldiers nailed Jesus to the cross, when they flogged him, that is representative of you and me. We're doing that. And the Jewish people did that. So if someone tells you, oh, the Jews put him to death, say, yes, and you and I did. So this new command that he gives them, it's not new. Like no one has ever said, people have said before, you should love each other. Like that's something that we know, right? So it's not like you should love each other if that's new, but it's the extent that you should love one another, which is new. Now in 1 John, John takes this further, and he actually also echoes this and says, a new command that I give you. And then he kind of backtracks and says, well, it's not new. It's one that you've had from the beginning. I think this is John 3, that you should love one another. And then he goes into more detail about what that looks like. And then he extends and talks about how God is love, right? Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone who loveth, right? That song that you know in those verses, that's where he's pulling this from. So it's not new, it's ancient, because God himself is love. But we are now supposed to love like Jesus, and that's how the world knows that we're his disciples. I think you all in this room really show that love. The way that you care for people and pray for people and serve each other is beautiful. And I hope that that's a testimony to others in this church and hopefully to the world as well. And that blows me away all the time. So thank you for following this command. Oh, but Simon. Verse 36, Lord, Simon Peter said to him, where are you going? Jesus answered, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow later. Okay, where is Jesus going? He's going to die. Yeah. You can't follow now, Peter, but you will follow later. This is one of, I think, 2 times where John explains to us that Peter is going to die for Jesus, and Jesus predicts it ahead of time. We'll get in I think the last chapter of John, we'll get the last one. Okay, so Peter is going to argue back with that. Verse 37, Lord, Peter said, why can't I follow you now? It almost sounds like a kid. Well, why not? Why can't I? I want it.
He's such an in-your-face person.
But you got to love it, right? I'll lay down my life for you. But it's so... I mean, you think about it, right? He's given up everything, his entire livelihood. He left his job, right, to follow Jesus. He's given up everything. And now his Lord, who he wants, he's got a sword to protect his Lord right now, okay? That he's got in his cloak. And he's like, where are you going? That I can't come with this sword and, no.
I never.
Yeah, so he's missing it. I'll lay down my life for you. Kind of interesting. Jesus replied, will you lay down your life for me? Truly I tell you, a rooster will not crow until you have denied me 3 times. Ouch.
Shut up and sit down.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. I love Peter's story. Yeah. That's it.
God makes all sorts of people for a
Yes.
reason.
That's right. That's
But
right.
you know that if you look at this little passage right here,
Mm-hmm.
we as Christians, when we're in a Christian area, we have great hopes in what we're going to do. And I feel like I'm like Peter sometimes when I'm out in the world. I don't stand up for Jesus like I should.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm him because he's doing it with his friends. I'll stand up, I'll die.
Yeah.
Put him by himself in the world, then it's a little more scary.
Yes. Yes.
I love Peter. He may be a little slow, but his heart's in the right place.
That's right. He brings us great hope. And Peter's story is so wonderful for us. We're going to get the dark side of his story in a couple of chapters when he does fulfill these verses. But then the beautiful side where Jesus restores him and 3 times says, Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. And so you just, like, Jesus personally loves each of us and knows our story. And so you can see clearly, like, he's like, yeah, you will lay down your life for me someday, but you got to go through this period. He had it all mapped out. So all the things that you're going through that's a surprise to you, he knows.
When you think
He's there the whole time.
Feet and him washing your feet, Peter didn't want him to.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's our pride, like, my feet don't look so good. I don't want you to get down there and see what they look like, you know.
Yeah.
And it's Peter is so much of so many of us. So.
Yeah.
Peter's human. I mean, he's just like the rest. He's got fears.
Yeah.
And when he does get approached about it, he's scared. He denies.
That's right. Well, we finished up John 13. We're going to get it further into 14. He's going to give his disciples encouragement, because you got to wonder right now with these things he's saying, and this has been a trend. He's been saying kind of these things that are confusing to them, that are hard to understand, like, I'm going away. You're going to look for me to the Jews and not find me. Right? He's also speaking of his death. He's talked about being betrayed. Now one of you is going to betray me, and also I'm leaving again, and you're not going to be able to follow me. So he's going to give some encouragement next week And so we'll dive into that very beautiful, some well-known passages there as well. We'll also get our seventh and last major I am statements. Remember, we've got the statements that begin with I am the whatever. There's a lot of minor ones as well. I am he. We have a couple more of those to go, I believe, as well. So those are the minor ones, but we have 7 major ones. Next week we'll hit the last one. Let's pray. Lord God, I thank you for your word. Thank you that you have washed us clean if we believe in you. And we don't need to doubt, because it's not us that's washing. And, well, did we get all of the spots? Did we miss a spot? You've washed us. Lord, when we doubt, when we have fears, and when we go through trials and tribulations, help us to look to you. I know I struggle sometimes, and, I seem to look to you last rather than, trying to do it on my own or do other things or just plain worry about things. Lord, help me be faithful to just lean on you immediately in that. Lord, I ask that you would make this word real to everybody here in this room and those who are watching later, that you would help us to understand your word and how it applies to us specifically. Whether we do need to be more faithful out there in the world for you. Maybe there's more that we can do there. Maybe we're working with someone right now that is hard to love, and we need to love the way that you have loved us with that individual. Or maybe we need to serve more. Maybe you're calling us to serve in a capacity that we've been resisting or not aware of, and I ask that you'd make that clear. Lord, whatever it is I ask that you would speak to your people this week in your name.